Hello, this is the lecture for Ancient and Medieval History for Tuesday, the 14th, not the 4th, the 14th of September in 2021. We have just completed a brief quiz on the material that we have covered so far, which is basically the time before Christ. Now, I'm going to give a quick review of the Maccabees just because it does cast such a shadow over the time of the life of Christ. About 100 years before Christ, an apparently all-powerful Greek empire was ruling Judea. And the Greeks attempted in their hubris, their overweening pride, to convert the Jews to the Olympian gods. Bad idea. Because while there are many things that the Jews are willing to put up with, being forcibly converted to another religion simply is not one of them. You can push people only so far. Judas Maccabee and his brother lead what seems to be, logically, a completely hopeless rebellion against the Greeks. But what the Maccabees say is, don't calculate the risk. You're not God. You don't understand the risk. It's not your job to decide when to fight. It's God's. He calls you to do the right thing. Do your duty, step forward, try your best. After all, if God is with us, who can be against us? This is a different way of looking at warfare. It's not what they would teach you at General Staff College or at War College. It is a way of looking at war as a form of religious duty. And it's very powerful because it is the self-same motive that has caused the Taliban to keep fighting for 20 years for Afghanistan, which our president just gave them, that has caused the Al-Qaeda organization, which did the bombings, to continue to try to survive. They've been largely destroyed, but they've been replaced by other organizations. It's what motivates the ISIS organization, Boko Haram in North Africa, and a bunch of other terror groups. If God is with us, who can be against us? This is something you really have to understand. Not everyone around the world is an American under the skin or an American in funny clothes. There is this very how to describe this without being completely dismissive. There is this sort of self-centered, hopeful way that some people have of looking at the world, where they say, if you just treat people well, they'll respond in kind. You do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I seem to remember rather important religious figures saying something like that. The problem is that attitude, when applied to politics, assumes that people have the same priorities, the same set of proportions, and the same goals. They don't. Culture matters. Remember, a culture is a group of people bound together by certain core beliefs. And if your culture is rooted in the idea of the faithful go to paradise and everyone else gets burned in the fires of hell, then you are not necessarily going to be willing to live and let live with them that are evil. You may very well want to destroy them for the sake of God. Or, if you can't wage open war with them, you might at least maintain an incredibly hostile attitude towards them, waiting for the opportunity to show your righteousness by smiting the infidel. Not everyone is an American under the skin. Not everyone believes in freedom. The thugs who rule most of the world's countries certainly don't. They believe that might makes right. Me have guns. You don't. You do what I say or I shoot you. And for the righteous, might freedom not simply be an opportunity for a person to do evil openly and get away with it? Not everyone has the same set of values or ideas. While most Americans would rather live peaceful, comfortable lives, getting married, having children, having an interesting career, living comfortably, earning a better way, or more comfortable way of life as time goes on, having fun, spending time with your friends. For many, the world is a battle. Life is war. And it's war for the sake of God, or the gods, or the great communist ideal, because they're religious fanatics too. And if life isn't about pleasure, or love, or building your ambition and your dream, or exploring your identity, very modern thing, or any of these other things that seem so important to us, if life is in fact war between good and evil, and you'd best pick a side, then our way of life doesn't particularly make much sense. There are people in this world that really believe that the fate of the universe and of their immortal soul is on the line. And they are not going to compromise. They are not going to live and let live. They are not going to stop fighting. So long as they believe that the author of life, that the Lord of the universe, demands that they take a stand and fight, they're going to fight. The Japanese felt this way at the end of World War II. On Okinawa, and before that on Saipan, they proved that it wasn't only their military that was willing to die in endless fanatical kamikaze suicide missions. The civilian population on Saipan did the same thing. On Okinawa did the same thing. Or they committed mass suicide. We have color newsreel footage of mothers holding children and babies and jumping off 200-foot tall cliffs onto the sea rocks rather than get captured by the gaijin, the round-eyed barbarians. Now that's dedication. The Japanese nation would probably have fought to the death. It took not one atom bomb, but two, to shock their god emperor into surrendering. Even then, elements within the Japanese army tried to steal the god emperor's recorded message. Even though they worshipped him as a god, they thought that he had become confused and misguided. They wanted to cause so much blood and death among the Americans and Allies landing that they would leave Japan alone. And had those battles happened, the world would be a very, very different place. Because they believed in a certain way. Don't play the game that they're crazy. They're not. In their own way, they are honorable, dedicated people. They're not stupid. From my point of view, they're bleeping evil. But they don't see it that way. That doesn't make them right. It means that they're going to be hardcore fighters. It means they're going to dig in their heels and they are going to do whatever it takes to serve their God and to fight in this war that is life. The Maccabees do that. And they win. The Greeks are morally rotten. The Greeks have no interest in defending their empire beyond a certain point. They have no interest in taking casualties. So despite the fact that the Greeks have army groups, naval fleets, an economy that can bring massive amounts of money to bear And every other thing that a nation has, an empire has, at the top of its game, what they don't have is heart. They don't have dedication. They don't have a willingness on the part of enough of their people to risk their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors for the sake of their beliefs. And people like that are on their way out. Because the Maccabees fight a hopeless battle in the name of God and win. 100 years later, when Judea is now under Roman rule, there are going to be people willing to do whatever it takes to fight the fight, because they believe if God is on our side, who can stand against us? So let's look at the Judea of Jesus a little bit. It is a deeply divided land. It had been ruled by Jewish kings that were Roman allies. It's now ruled directly by the Romans. The area around Jerusalem, the area where Jesus grows up, is ruled by a Jewish king, an ally of Rome. The land is divided. The official leaders of the Jewish people under Roman rule is the priesthood. You don't have to remember this now, you will later, called the Sanhedrin. You got the priests, then you got the Sadducees. The Sadducees are pro-Romans, Jews who are willing to collaborate because they believe that the Roman Empire is the world and you can be a Jew and still be loyal to the Roman Empire. So you got the high priests who lead the temple. You've got the Sadducees who want to work with Rome. You've got Pharisees. Again, you don't need to remember these names right now. You will when we do this in much more detail. This is an overture. It's not the symphony. You've got the Pharisees who believe that religion constitutes following every single solitary law in the Mishnah, which is a scribal law based on the Ten Commandments. These guys can't live a normal life because you can't live a normal life following every single rule that the Jewish priests have come up with about how you should live your life. So they separate from regular life. They wear special clothing so that everyone can admire their piety and their willingness to obey the rules and everything else. Usually you're a Pharisee for a period of time. In Rome, they have Vestal virgins who are females that do the same thing. They live this lifestyle for the sake of the gods. But it's not a normal lifestyle, and very few people do it for more than a few years. And then you've got the zealots. Zealots. Now, you've probably heard the word zealot before, referring to any kind of fanatic. But capital Z zealots are anti-Roman Jewish terrorists. They want to kill them Romans. They want to drive them out. They want to be today's, or Jesus' times, Maccabees. The Zealots are a terrorist organization. And they don't only kill Romans. They kill Sadducees. They kill Jews that work with the Romans. One of the qualities of the time of the historical Jesus, and yes, there was a guy named Yeshua Bar Joseph. He did exist. Whether he was the Son of God or not, that's a matter of belief. That he was a historical figure is undeniable. So, Jesus grows up running a carpenter shop until his younger relatives can take over the place. He hears interesting stories about his birth, but he feels a call around age 30 to leave home and do something important. He goes to the only prophet of his time, John the Baptist, gets baptized in the River Jordan, goes into the wilderness for an undetermined amount of time, 40 days they say. Again, that's an undetermined amount of time, from a few weeks to a couple months. And in the desert he fasts and is tempted. He's tempted by hunger, he's tempted by lust, he is tempted by power, he is tempted by the adversary. The word Satan means the adversary. He comes out of this experience with an idea of what his purpose is. He preaches for 3 years that the kingdom of God is at hand. The kingdom of God is when you obey God willingly. That love has a special place. Loving God above all things, loving your neighbor as yourself. Those are the two commandments that Christians learned from Jesus. That the temple has become distracted from true faith. That the Pharisees have become prideful. That the Sadducees worship money. He doesn't say much directly against the Zealots, but Jesus is no social revolutionary. Jesus says the poor will be with us always, that you should love your neighbor. When Jesus causes a riot at the temple, overturns the tables of money changers who are part of the temple process. People go to the temple, they have to pay their tax in Hebrew coins. Nobody uses Hebrew coins, so they convert Roman denarii to Hebrew shekels, and the money changers make a small profit off of this. Jesus finds it obscene to do business, commerce, inside the temple, even if it's only the court of the Gentiles. So Jesus causes a riot. He overturns their tables. In the course of the aftermath of this, he's captured by the Sanhedrin with the help of a traitor among his people, Judas. And Jesus says, when asked, "Who do you think you are?" Jesus responds, "I am." Now, if you remember my previous lesson, I am is the name of God. 1 second, Peter. I am is a claim to be God. He's sentenced to death at the insistence of the priests by the Romans, who in this case are weak. They give in to the mob, they give in to the crowd to avoid trouble. And at age 33 or so, Jesus is executed in the worst way the Romans have, for public execution. You are crucified. Your feet are nailed and strapped. Your arms are attached to a crossbeam. And in most cases, what happens, if the Romans really want to make an example, is they don't do anything else. They leave you to hang there. Eventually your muscles tire, your arms rip out of their sockets, you're hanging there by your ligaments, birds begin picking at your flesh, they eat your eyes, they take your tongue, you're just hanging there, and it takes days and days to die, and it's in front of everyone. You know, people walk by, children, women, men, everyone doing their business, and it's like telephone poles, but it's not telephone poles, it's crucified human beings. In the case of when they want to be more merciful, they'll usually break the legs of the person so the person will die more quickly. Jesus was lucky in this sense. He died in 3 hours. That's a short time to be on a cross compared to most people. He wasn't lucky in that he died on a cross. Horribly painful death. Now, there's a lot more, and I'll be covering that when we do it. Understand this. On the first Easter Sunday, before anyone went out anywhere, all the Christians in the world could fit into a single room filled with worried, depressed people. You see, just before he had died, Jesus revealed himself. Actually, he asked his followers, "Who do you think I am?" And many of them said, "You're a prophet. You're Elijah reborn. You're." And Peter, the oldest of his followers, a fisherman, a guy who's married, says, "You're the Christ. You're the Messiah. You're the anointed one of God. You're the Son of God." Jesus was not really preaching to the crowds. His real students were the people that were with him for the better part of 3 years, his apostles and his disciples. They were the ones that he really taught. The crowds came and went. The crowds didn't defend Jesus when he was executed. In fact, some of the same people cheered when he was killed. The people that Jesus was teaching were the people with him. And one of them recognized what he thought he was, which is the Son of God, the Redeemer, the one who would change the world. On Easter Sunday, on the third day after his execution, Christians witnessed what seemed to be an ultimate miracle. Jesus walking around, talking to them. And for several weeks, Jesus, according to the Christian belief, spent time, the resurrected Christ, taught the apostles and disciples what to do. And then on Pentecost, he ascends bodily into heaven, and Christians believe remains with God the Father, the Creator, until the second coming, which is Judgment Day. Jews, in large part, never accept this. This is not the Messiah they were waiting for. They were waiting for a Messiah that was a combination of Gandalf the Grey and Aragorn, son of Arathorn, if you remember your Lord of the Rings. They were expecting the combination of a wizard warrior akin to Superman. They were expecting a superhero. And they were expecting that superhero to conquer the world and to bring the un-Jewish people under their heel. That's the expression, under their heel. A humble carpenter's son who has no army, whose magic seems to be limited to healing, who teaches fishermen and street ruffians and accepts whores and tax collectors among his followers, a guy who consorts with sinners. That's not the one we were waiting for, many Jews say. They're still waiting for the Messiah. They're still waiting for the Day of Atonement and for the end of the world and for the transformation of the world to heaven. Jesus does not fit the bill. However, those few Jews that are convinced that Jesus is the Son of God and that they were mistaken in their expectations, that the Jews were mistaken in their expectations, are able to go out into the Greek and Roman world. In the Greek and Roman world, the worshippers of Zeus and Hera, of Jupiter and Juno, the Olympian gods are fun. You can get a lot out of reading the Iliad and the Odyssey. You can learn a lot from the stories of Odysseus and Orpheus. You can get a sense of what the Greek heart is by reading the legends of Theseus and even Hercules. But does that explain why good things happen to bad people? Why bad things happen to good people? Are they really a comfort when grandma's sick and getting ready to pass? When you're in pain and the pain won't stop? The Olympian gods don't offer. The Greeks and Romans in the time after Jesus a satisfying set of answers to why life is the way it is and why we are here. They're great stories. They're fine legends. When push comes to shove, the Greeks and Romans feel empty inside. And by this point in time, unlike earlier periods, most of them don't believe in the Olympians beyond a very limited point. Christianity spreads among the Greeks and the Romans like fire in the Palouse in August. It catches hold of the imaginations of slaves and of aristocrats, soldiers, and of craftsmen, and of everyone in between. Christianity even talks to women, children, and slaves, the unwanted, the bottom of society, which the Olympians don't really talk to. If you don't happen to be a hero, Achilles doesn't have much to say to you. And not everyone's a hero. So Christianity spreads, and it spreads because of one man aside from Jesus and the others. His name is Paul. Actually, he's born a guy, you should remember St. Paul. He's born Saul, like Abraham was born Abram. And Saul starts out as a Pharisee, a person who lives the law, and a persecutor of Christians. In the period immediately after the execution of Jesus, Paul travels through Jerusalem, hunting Christians down and putting them on trial. He is personally responsible for the execution of St. Stephen, who was Judas's replacement among the 12 apostles. Saul is so dedicated to destroying what he considers to be a misguided cult within Judaism that they hire him to go to Damascus, Syria, and destroy the Christians there. On the way to Damascus, Paul falls off his mount. He hits his head. He ends up in a fever that lasts for weeks. And after hitting his head, he goes blind. In his fever dreams and in his suffering blindness, Paul claims thereafter that he heard a voice, the voice of Jesus saying, "Why do you persecute my people? Why do you make my people suffer?" Whether or not you believe that was the result of a concussion or of a divine intervention, Paul appears after the injuries heal. Not Saul, Paul. And Paul becomes not only a Christian, but a Christian missionary, ardent, eager to spread the faith. Sometimes the greatest converts are former enemies. Paul has this notion that he is called by Christ to be the apostle to the Gentiles, which is a fancy word for Greeks and Romans, and anyone who's not a Jew. So Paul goes out into the Greek and Roman world and begins converting people, Jews and Greeks and Romans, outside of Judea, very effectively. But there's a problem that becomes evident within a few years. So many people want to come to Christ. But does that mean that an adult man needs to be circumcised? That an adult man who grew up needs to have a knife taken to his most sensitive bits, which is not an appealing prospect for an adult man? Does it mean that we have to stop eating pig and keep kosher like the Jews? The question really is, does a person need to become Jewish in order to become Christian? Do you first need to become a Jew to become Christian? Because a lot of people would love to come to Christ, but they don't want that operation. They don't want to stop eating pig. They want to love your neighbor as yourself and love God above things, all things. Do unto others as you do unto yourself, the golden rule. Turn the other cheek. If somebody slaps you, turn the other cheek. Give them the other cheek to slap. Paul prays on it. And one of the most important decisions in human history is that Paul comes to the conclusion that God does not require Christians to have first become Jewish. People can be Greek or Roman culturally, but Christians religiously. With that, Christianity begins to spread so fast that the Roman Empire begins to oppress them. The Romans are afraid. They see the Christians as sex fiends because they give the kiss of peace in their worship services. They think they're cannibals because Christians eat the body of Christ and drink his blood in Holy Communion. Now, for the Romans to call people cannibals, that's bad. For the Romans to call people sex fiends is ludicrous. Wealthy Romans have orgy rooms in their townhouses and country villas. They are not sexually prudish. Au contraire, the Romans of the imperial period are absolute sex fiends. But they call the Christians worse. The Romans believe that the Christians will weaken Rome because Christians at this point mostly are pacifists. The idea of a Christian soldier seems bizarre. And because the pagan gods that have given Rome conquest over the known world will feel betrayed if too many Romans become Christians. So the Romans start punishing the Christians. I'm going to come back to the Jewish stuff and go straight to the story of Constantine. Constantine becomes emperor in the early 300s AD, so 300 years after the life of Christ. During those 300 years, Christians are thrown to the lions to entertain the crowds at the arena before the gladiator games. It's sort of like coming attractions if you go to see the movie. Hey, instead of coming attractions, let's watch some Christians, men, women, and children eaten by hungry lions or bears. Oh my. Christians under the Emperor Nero are crucified on the streets of Rome, covered with pitch, which is sticky tar, and lit on fire to be streetlights. You have to make this stuff. This is crazy. But the Christians are treated this way because Nero blames them for a great fire in Rome. So let's burn them. Christians, when they're sent to the mines, have their ankles drilled through, have hot lead poured in, and if they survive that, they now have shackles that are part of their legs and feet. You can't take off. Christians are targeted for all sorts of torture unless a Christian spits on the Chi-Rho, which is the monogram of Christ. It was the symbol of Christianity in the early church. Spits on it, steps on it, defiles it, presses it in, and sacrifices incense to the God Emperor of Rome. If the Christian does these things, he's let alone. If a Christian refuses to do these things, he's going to be either worked to death in the mines, fed to the lions, or just killed outright. Thousands are martyred. But the harder the Roman government tries to destroy the Christian faith, the wider its spread, the stronger it becomes. In the early 300s, Constantine's mother is a Christian. Constantine's father is an emperor of Rome, one of four that share power. After those four leave power, Constantine competes with other emperors to become the one and only emperor. At Rome, there's a bridge called the Milvian Bridge, which is one of the ways into the city. Constantine has marched on Rome from the north. So he's marched down the boot to its knee where Rome is. There's another emperor inside of Rome that's ready to fight Constantine for control. It's one of those bright fall days that has dark clouds scudding across a very bright sky. Sun rays coming out of nowhere, illuminating the land. And Constantine says that the sky opens up, he's hit by a sun ray, and he hears in his head, "In hoc signo vinces." In hoc signo vinces is Latin for "in this sign conquer." And he sees in the sky the Chi-Rho, the monogram of Christ. That's Rho, that's Chi, because in Greek, that's how you write the word Christ. This is the symbol of Christianity. And Constantine tells his men with their knives to carve the Chi-Rho onto their helmets and onto their shields. In this sign conquer, in hoc signo vinces. He wins the battle of the Milvian Bridge. And in doing so, He makes Christianity legal for the first time, and he sets the stage for Christianity to become Rome's official religion. After Constantine, Rome does become Christian for its last 150 years. Eventually, the Christian Empire in the West falls. In 476, the Roman Empire in Western Europe falls. And the only thing to last past its destruction is the Christian church that was established during its last 150 years. So where we're going to leave things is the Christians have left the Jewish path. The Romans persecuted the Christians, then they became Christian. And when Rome falls, Christianity is the one legacy of Rome that is intact. And it is Christianity around which our Western civilization will form. When rain forms in the upper atmosphere, you've got a little bit of dust, and as the air heats and cools, water condenses around the dust. And when the water is heavy enough, it falls from the sky as rain. The mote of dust around which our whole civilization coheres is the Christian faith, left by Rome in its wreckage, in the wreckage of Rome in Western Europe around the year 500. Next time, we'll go back to the story of the Jews. Any questions? Thank you for your attention.